Well, now that that's dry, we'll have a look at these trees. And I'm going to start with the one on the left-hand side, which is the furthest away, so that we always work from the background to the foreground. It does make it easier. We need a nice rich dark brown mixture. So I'm going to take some Oriolin and Rose Madder. I can mix it on top of that dark brown I had earlier on. And then, of course, I'm darkening that with some ultramarine. This needs to be a fairly thick mixture, not too runny, this one. And I'm using this detailer brush. Okay, so we'll start with this one on the left. Just bring it out, and I'm going to work to that shape I put in earlier on. Now, same colour again, but I've swapped to the liner writer brush, which will help me to get the really thin lines to represent the fine branches, and I'm working now to that shape that I put in earlier on that marks the edge of the tree. I always do that shape. Not only does it give us a suggestion of all the tiny branches, it establishes where the tree will end. You should never start off painting the branches of a tree without deciding where you're going to stop them. Sticking with this dark colour, this dark brown, I'm going to take the detailer brush. Again, I'm going to hold the brush with my thumb at one side of the handle and 4 fingers at the other. Let's make this tree look as though it's got ivy clinging to it, so it's got a bit of texture to it. Just catching this, it's just a light touch really, just to catch the surface of the paper. A bit more paint on it, but not too much. It still works a lot easier if it's fairly dry. And if you dry a lot of the paint off so it's almost totally dry, you can just catch the surface like that, and it's really, really effective. Let's darken it in a little bit in the centre. And then taking the liner writer brush and some more of this dark colour, not too much on the brush again, we'll work now to the shape we put in earlier on, making sure that I make this tree a little bit taller than the one at the other side that we've just done. Following on from that dry brushwork now and taking the branches right out to the very edge of that shape. And then just touch more of that dry brushwork to really sort of finish off the effect. I've got the large brush again. And before I attempt to paint this tree, we need some colour mixed for it. So let's get a lighter colour for the light side of the trunk with some Oriolin and Rose Madder, sort of a warm orangey brown colour. And then we do need some more of the rich dark brown. So we started with Oriolin and Rose Madder to create that orange, and then darkened it into a rich dark brown with ultramarine. The light in this scene is coming from the right hand side. So the right hand side of the trunk is the lightest part. And I'm going to paint that light colour up there and into the start of these branches, not too far up at the moment because it'll be dry by the time I get to it if I paint too much in. Bringing that over the left hand side as well, all the way out down the tree, and then immediately picking up the dark colour. Don't wash your brush between these, because you inevitably, if you wash your brush between the light and the dark colour, you'll add water to it. And I'm putting the dark brown now at the left hand side away from the light, encouraging it to merge with the lighter colour, a bit into the crook of that branch as well and along the edge there. Then with the detailer brush, clean but damp so that it's not too wet, I'm just encouraging those colours to merge a bit like that, just to make it look rounded, more cylindrical. I also think we don't want a hard edge where it meets the ground as well, so using the same brush, the same damp clean brush, we'll just soften the tree into the grass for the time being. Now a bit more of the lighter colour on these thicker branches with the detailer brush, and then a good brush full of that dark. And let's start by taking these branches up now until we don't need any light colour in them at all. They're sort of dark against the light sky. Let's bring some down here, reminding myself that I've got that thin wash, that shape that I put in earlier on to work to. Let's take a bit more of that orange colour, that rose madder and oriolin, work a bit of that into it as well, like a bit of sunlight catching these branches. And then the dark again, and work straight in with that dark. Remember, it's got to go off the picture, out of the scene. This tree disappears off the edge of the picture. Now, just to complete this, I'm getting the liner writer brush and charging it up with more of that rich dark brown paint. And let's just get a few fine branches in. Just because this tree is a lot nearer doesn't mean that at the edge of it the branches aren't just as fine as with the others. Carry them on where we left off and getting some really fine branch work in. Just keep checking what you're doing and ask yourself if you've done enough. It is easy to over detail a big tree like this. Okay, now that we've done that, I'm going to put a little bit of detail in for these fence posts and the gate, little structures like that that give us a bit of scale, a bit of perspective. So I've got more of this dark brown, I've got the detailer brush, and I want to give the impression that this little fence carries on out of the scene and disappears off down the road there. So it's got to get smaller and smaller as it goes out of the scene. We'll put a gate post in here. These are going to be important because they'll cast some shadow into the scene in a moment as well. Let's very quickly put the 5-bar gate in. Look at the lines of the gate, how they converge as well, like the lines of the road, to increase that feeling of perspective. Let's look at this left-hand side now, maybe a few fence posts there. They do give it scale, and the fact that they're getting smaller as they're going further into the scene does help with this feeling of perspective. Add a touch more rose madder to that colour to warm it slightly. And we'll look at a little bit of detail here. I'm going to do a bit more dry brush work to look like a sort of dark bush in the very left-hand corner here. Just a bit of dry brush work to suggest it, and a few branches coming out of there, maybe the odd leaf left on them. Maybe a little bit of dry brush work in here to suggest foliage. Now let's just look across at the other side, at the right-hand side of the scene. I think a few more posts to give it some scale here as well, leading from the tree. This side as well here. These just help to give it a little bit of scale. And maybe there's a few little stones gathered in the edge. Then I'm going to still work with the detailer brush and get a little bit of that purpley colour, that rose madder and cobalt blue, fairly thin. And let's just put a few perspective lines. These will help to lead the viewer's eye into the scene. Right from the foreground there. Try and make them fainter as they get further into the picture. Just leading your eye in and down that road there. Well, now that that's dry, it's just a case of rounding the whole scene off with some shadow. The first thing to do is to remind yourself where the light is coming from, and in this case it's coming from the right hand side. I've got a mixture of ultramarine blue and rose madder that I used earlier on, and I've got the detailer brush. It's very important with shadows that you don't mix it too strongly. It's got to be transparent. You should be able to see the detail underneath through the shadow. So first of all we'll look at this gate. That would certainly be casting a bit of shadow down the grass bank and onto the road there. Then there's this tree here. I think we'd get a bit of shadow from that into the road right across there. Then some shadow from these posts here. In fact, this little wall here that I've indicated, that would have shadow over all of it because the light's coming from behind it to there as well. Notice I've left a little glimpse of white paper the other side of that, on the top of it rather, just to look as though the light's catching it. Now this big tree, that's going to really cast a strong shadow right down the bank and across the road. Look how I've used the shadows to describe the shape of the land as well. The shadow describes the fact that the road is flat, but the verges either side go uphill. And then I'm getting the larger brush, going back to the large brush. I really find it a good idea to put a strong shadow right across the very foreground of the picture. If you darken the foreground a bit, it brings it forward and lightens up the middle of the scene. And it needn't even be anything in the picture that's making the shadow. It could be a tree or a large object just out of the scene. And I think we'll just clean the brush, take most of the moisture off so it's just damp, and soften that shadow in a bit at that point there. Okay, so that's finished really, just a simple landscape, but full of vibrancy and colour, and hopefully having that feeling that you can really walk into it. Well, we've covered a lot of ground here, so don't expect your first attempt to be a masterpiece. It is well worth practicing and working at it, and you'll soon start to see some good results.
Now available on DVD. Try these techniques yourself at home whenever you wish. Today's workshop is part of the Watercolour As If by Magic Beginners course. 6 fantastic 20-minute workshops on DVD, now available to order from the Painting and Drawing channel. For further information and to order your copy, go to www.paintingdrawingchannel.com.
Okay, time to paint the windows and the actual glass panes. Now, glass panes have no colour. They only reflect colour or allow us to see what's behind those panes. So I'm going to make a few decisions here on behalf of the householder and decide that they're going to have some curtains, because often houses will, just run in along the inside here. So I'm going to drop in here quite loosely at the moment, a mixture of predominantly blue, which is the ultramarine blue, with just a touch of that brown burnt umber. And having dropped a bit of colour in, I'm going to drop some water in there, some water onto there, and because these curtains aren't going to be pure white, I'm just going to pull the colour lightly over to the edge, working around that window frame all the time. Now I'm going back to my mixture of a touch of burnt umber with the ultramarine to darken that top there. And I'm starting to leave more and more areas unpainted, because they're going to serve as the reflections. Bearing in mind at all time, this is going to dry a lot lighter than it seems at this particular moment. We're going to have a really, really light window down there, just for now. Now I'm going to pull this paint over to the edge just a fraction, and I'm going to blot a little here. And now, the only problem we have is that that actual window frame is sitting flat against the brickwork. Now, I know that's not the case. So what I'm going to do is to use a very watery mixture and very carefully run it along one edge and under the bottom of that brickwork, and now just drop some water onto there, pull it along, and a touch of very dark colour in. Pull it out, not all the way down the line, but just reinforcing the sharpness of that edge along by the window ledge. And again, we know that will dry an awful lot lighter.